AITA for refusing to let my sister move in after she got kicked out of her apartment? I, 28F, am the middle child of 3 siblings. My older brother, Jake, 32M, is married with kids, and my younger sister, Kate, 25F, is single. I've always had a close relationship with Jake, but Kate and I have had a more complicated dynamic. Growing up, Kate was always the more rebellious one, while I followed the rules and focused on my studies. Our parents are fairly lenient, especially with Kate, who always seemed to get away with things. I, on the other hand, was held to a much higher standard. Our relationship has always been a bit strained, but I've tried to keep things civil, especially as we've gotten older. A few weeks ago, Kate called me in tears saying that she had been kicked out of her apartment. Apparently, she had fallen behind on her rent, and her landlord gave her the boot. She admitted that she had been struggling with money, but had been too proud to ask for help. She begged me to let her stay with me for a while until she got back on her feet. Now, I want to clarify that I've always been there for Kate when she needed it. When she was in high school, I helped her with her homework and gave her advice on how to navigate relationships. But over the years, Kate has made some choices that I don't agree with. She often prioritizes short-term fun over her long-term responsibilities. She's been in and out of jobs, has a history of partying, and has a tendency to take advantage of people's kindness. Still, I felt guilty about her situation. She's my sister, and I didn't want to see her on the streets. So, I agreed to let her stay with me temporarily. I live in a small 2-bedroom apartment in the city, and while it's cozy, it's not huge. I don't mind hosting people for short periods, but I was concerned about how this would impact my routine. I work full-time as a graphic designer, and my work-from-home setup requires a quiet, distraction-free environment. I also live with my boyfriend, Tom, 30M, who I've been dating for about 2 years. Tom is easygoing, but I knew having another person in the apartment could create some tension. I spoke to him about it, and he was hesitant but agreed to support me in helping Kate. The first few days went relatively smoothly. Kate was polite, and we spent some time catching up. She was actively looking for a new job and seemed determined to get her life together. However, things quickly began to go downhill. Kate started to act like she was living in a hotel rather than a temporary living arrangement. She spent her days lounging around, binge-watching TV shows, and rarely leaving the apartment. Meanwhile, I was working from home and trying to keep the place organized. It was becoming difficult to focus with Kate around, especially since she didn't have much of a routine. I asked her gently if she could try to be more mindful of the noise and keep her activities to a minimum while I was working. At first, she agreed and apologized, but things didn't improve. She would often leave her dirty dishes in the sink for days and forget to clean up after herself. I didn't mind cleaning up, but it became a regular pattern. When I asked her to take care of it, she would make excuses, saying that she didn't have the energy to clean up after herself because she was dealing with a lot right now. I understood that she was going through a tough time, but I couldn't continue to live in a messy environment, especially when I had to focus on my job. The situation escalated when Kate started inviting her friends over. At first, it was just 1 or 2 people, but soon enough she was hosting parties. She would tell me she was having a couple of friends over, and then the next thing I knew, there were 5 or 6 people in my living room, drinking, laughing loudly, and making a mess. Tom and I would retreat to our bedroom to escape the noise, but it felt like we were being pushed out of our own home. We talked about it and decided to set some boundaries. I asked Kate to limit the number of people she invited over and to respect our space. She agreed, but didn't seem to take it seriously. One night, things reached a breaking point. I had an important presentation the next morning, and I needed to get some work done in peace. Kate invited a group of friends over, and they were blasting music until midnight. I asked her to turn it down, and she responded with, "Come on, it's just one night. You're so uptight." I tried to explain that I had an early meeting the next day, but she brushed me off. I ended up going to bed with the music still pounding, barely getting any sleep before my presentation. I was beyond frustrated, and I couldn't ignore the fact that Kate was being inconsiderate of my needs. The next morning, I was exhausted and had a difficult time focusing during my meeting. I snapped and told Kate that I couldn't keep doing this. I told her that her behavior was disrespectful and that I needed her to either follow the house rules or find another place to stay. She was furious. She accused me of being selfish and not understanding how hard her life was. She said that I was acting like she was a burden and that I should just be grateful I was able to help her at all. I tried to stay calm, but at that point, I was done. I told her that I had already helped her for a week, but if she continued to disregard the boundaries we had set, she needed to leave. Kate refused to leave. She said she didn't have anywhere else to go, and I was her only option. I felt guilty, but I also felt like I had no choice. I reminded her that I had been clear about my expectations from the beginning, and it wasn't fair for her to keep taking advantage of my hospitality. Still, she insisted that I was being unreasonable. The argument got heated, and I ended up telling her that I couldn't let her stay anymore. I told her that if she didn't leave by the end of the week, I would have to ask her to find another place to stay, even if that meant she had to go back to her parents. When I told my parents about the situation, they were upset with me. They said that I was being too harsh and that I should just let Kate stay until she found another apartment. They argued that I wasn't being compassionate enough, considering Kate was going through a tough time. I tried to explain that it wasn't just about her situation, it was about her lack of respect for my home, my relationship, and my boundaries. My parents still insisted I was wrong, and now they're mad at me for not being more supportive. Since then, Kate has barely spoken to me. She's still angry, and I'm honestly feeling torn. I feel like I did the right thing by setting boundaries and standing up for myself, but part of me feels guilty. I know that she's struggling, but I also know that I can't keep enabling her behavior. I've been trying to be a good sister, but I also need to take care of my own life and well-being. So, AITA for refusing to let my sister move in after she got kicked out of her apartment? AITA for exposing my brother-in-law's lies at a family gathering and ruining his reputation? I-34F come from a large, tight-knit family. We have Sunday dinners every week, big gatherings for holidays, and constant group chats. It's something I've always loved, but it can also be a pressure cooker for drama, especially when someone brings their personal baggage into the mix. This story involves my sister, Emily, 36F, and her husband, Ryan, 38M. Emily and Ryan have been married for 8 years, and while Emily has always been my best friend and biggest supporter, Ryan and I have never gotten along. He's the kind of guy who feels the need to be the center of attention at all times, often at the expense of others. He brags constantly about his career, his fitness, his knowledge about any given subject. It's exhausting. But Emily loves him, and for her sake, I've always tried to keep the peace. Ryan's favorite subject to brag about is his job. He's a self-made entrepreneur who claims to have built his tech consulting business from the ground up. Every family gathering, he talks about his latest high-profile clients, his massive contracts, and how he's the reason their businesses are thriving. He paints himself as a genius who's always in demand, and while my parents and some of my siblings eat it up, I've always been skeptical. I work in the tech industry myself, and some of the things he says don't add up. I've caught him exaggerating his qualifications before, but I've always let it slide because calling him out would only create tension with Emily. The turning point came last month at our mom's birthday dinner. It was a big event with all of our extended family and some family friends in attendance. As usual, Ryan was in full performance mode, regaling everyone with stories about his latest $1 million deal. At one point, he started talking about how he was hired by a major Fortune 500 company to completely overhaul their IT infrastructure. He described it as a groundbreaking project that only someone with his expertise could handle. The details were vague, but he spoke with such confidence that most people believed him. What he didn't realize is that I actually know someone who works for that company. My friend Mark, who I've known since college. Mark is in their IT department and has mentioned some of their ongoing projects in passing. As Ryan was talking, alarm bells started going off in my head because nothing he said matched up with what Mark had told me. I decided to text Mark discreetly and ask if he'd heard of Ryan or the project he was describing. Mark replied almost immediately, saying he had no idea who Ryan was and that their IT overhaul was being handled internally by their own team. He also mentioned that they never contract out work like that to individual consultants. I sat there, fuming, as Ryan continued to bask in the admiration of everyone around him. It wasn't just the lies that bothered me. It was the way he used them to manipulate people and make himself look better. He was taking advantage of my family's trust, and I couldn't take it anymore. I decided then and there that I wasn't going to let him get away with it. When Ryan paused for a breath, I casually asked him some pointed questions about the project. I kept my tone light and friendly, but I could tell he was starting to squirm. I asked about the scope of the project, the timeline, and some specific technical details. He gave vague answers and tried to steer the conversation away, but I kept pressing. Finally, I dropped the bomb. That's interesting because my friend Mark works in their IT department, and he said their overhaul is being done internally. He's never heard of you. The room went silent. Ryan's face turned bright red, and he stammered something about how Mark must not be high enough up the chain to know what was going on. I wasn't buying it, and neither was anyone else. I calmly explained that Mark is one of the senior managers on the team and would absolutely know if they had hired an outside consultant. At that point, Ryan tried to laugh it off and claimed I was just jealous of his success. That's when I pulled out my phone and read Mark's messages verbatim, confirming that Ryan's story was completely fabricated. The atmosphere at the table was tense, to say the least. My parents looked shocked, and Emily was staring at Ryan with a mix of confusion and betrayal. Ryan got defensive and accused me of trying to ruin his reputation out of spite. He said I was being petty and that this was a private family gathering, not a courtroom. I told him that if he didn't want to be exposed, he shouldn't lie. At that point, Ryan stormed out of the house, and Emily ran after him. Since then, things have been a mess. Ryan hasn't spoken to me directly, but he's been telling anyone who will listen that I humiliated him in front of the family and sabotaged his credibility. Emily is stuck in the middle and has been avoiding me, which breaks my heart because we've always been so close. My parents think I should have handled the situation privately and that calling Ryan out in front of everyone was unnecessary. They say I should apologize to keep the peace, but I don't think I did anything wrong. If anything, I feel like I protected my family from being conned by someone who clearly has no problem lying to their faces. Some of my siblings are on my side and think Ryan deserved to be called out, but others agree with my parents and think I overstepped. The family is divided, and I'm starting to wonder if I should have just let it go. I hate the idea of losing my relationship with Emily over this, but I also hate the thought of letting Ryan continue to lie and manipulate people without consequences. So, AITA for exposing my brother-in-law's lies at a family gathering and ruining his reputation. AITA for refusing to let my parents stay with me after they sold our childhood home without telling me. I'm a 29-year-old woman living in a big city. I moved here after college to pursue a career in marketing, and I've built a pretty stable life for myself. I've got a nice one-bedroom apartment, a decent job, and a solid group of friends. I don't have a partner right now, but I've been enjoying focusing on my own goals and living independently. My parents, on the other hand, live in the small town where I grew up, in the house they bought when I was a kid. Or at least, they did. This story takes place because of what they decided to do with that house. Growing up, we weren't wealthy, but my parents worked hard to make our home comfortable. It's a modest 3-bedroom house with a big backyard, and it's full of memories. Every holiday, birthday, and family gathering was held there. My room still had the posters on the walls and the books on the shelves from when I was a teenager. It was the one constant in my life, even after I moved away. I visited every few months, and being there always felt like hitting the reset button. It was my safe place, my connection to my roots. A couple of months ago, during one of our weekly phone calls, my mom casually mentioned that they were thinking about downsizing. I didn't think much of it at the time. They're in their early 60s, and I figured they were just planning for retirement. But that's all she said, thinking about it. No further details, no mention of timelines, and certainly no indication that they had already made any concrete plans. Fast forward to last week. My mom called me, and the first thing she said was, "We sold the house." I was stunned. I asked her what she meant, and she explained that they had been quietly looking for buyers for a few months and finally got an offer they couldn't refuse. They were moving out in less than a month and planning to travel for a while before deciding where to settle next. She sounded so excited, like this was the best news in the world. Meanwhile, I felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me. I couldn't believe they'd made such a huge decision without telling me. I asked why they hadn't even given me a heads up, and my mom's response was, "We didn't think it was a big deal. It's just a house." I told her it wasn't just a house to me. It was my childhood home, the one place that always felt like home no matter where I lived. She brushed me off, saying I was being overly sentimental and that it was their house, so they didn't owe me an explanation. My dad chimed in to agree, saying that I was an adult now and needed to let go of the past. The conversation ended with me feeling angry and hurt. I spent the rest of the day stewing over it, trying to make sense of my emotions. On one hand, they were right. It was their house, and they had the right to do whatever they wanted with it. But on the other hand, it felt like such a betrayal. How could they make such a huge decision without even considering how it might affect me? It wasn't about the house itself. It was about the lack of communication and the disregard for my feelings. A few days later, my mom called again, this time to ask for a favor. Since they would be between homes for a while, they wanted to stay with me for a couple of weeks while they figured out their next steps. My apartment is small, but it has a pull-out couch, and they assumed it wouldn't be a problem. The thing is, I've always valued my independence and my space. Having my parents live with me, even temporarily, would be a huge disruption to my routine. Plus, I was still upset about the house and didn't feel particularly generous toward them. I told my mom I needed time to think about it, but she immediately started guilt-tripping me. She said it was only for a short time, and as their daughter, I should be willing to help them out. When I pointed out that they hadn't even bothered to include me in the decision to sell the house, she got defensive. She accused me of holding a grudge and said I was being childish. I told her I wasn't comfortable having them stay with me right now, especially given how hurt I was about the way they'd handled everything. That conversation didn't go well. My mom called me selfish and ungrateful, and my dad chimed in again to agree with her. They said they had done so much for me over the years, and the least I could do was let them crash at my place for a couple of weeks. I reminded them that I wasn't obligated to host them, especially after they'd made such a huge decision without considering how it would affect me. My mom said I was being petty and vindictive, and my dad called me disrespectful. Since then, my parents have been telling other family members about the situation, and the reactions have been mixed. My older brother thinks I should suck it up and let them stay because family is family. My aunt, on the other hand, agrees that they were wrong to sell the house without telling me and thinks I have every right to set boundaries. My cousins are split down the middle, with some calling me selfish and others saying my parents brought this on themselves. I've been feeling so conflicted about all of this. On one hand, I know my parents worked hard to provide for me growing up, and I do feel a sense of obligation to help them if they need it. But on the other hand, I can't ignore how hurt I am about the way they handled the sale of the house. It feels like they dismissed my feelings entirely, and now they expect me to drop everything to accommodate them. I don't think it's fair, but I also don't want to be the bad guy in this situation. So, am I the asshole for refusing to let my parents stay with me after they sold our childhood home without telling me? AITA for telling my sister she's to blame for her husband's affair and refusing to support her divorce? I never thought I'd end up writing something like this, but I'm feeling like the family pariah, and I need to know if I'm in the wrong here. To start, I'm 31M, and I have two older sisters, Claire, 37F, and Sarah, 39F. This story mostly revolves around Claire, her husband Jake, 38M, and the fallout from their crumbling marriage. For context, Claire and Jake have been married for almost 10 years and have two kids, a 9-year-old son and a 6-year-old daughter. From the outside, they always seemed like a strong couple. Jake works in finance and has a pretty demanding job, while Claire has been a stay-at-home mom since their son was born. Jake makes good money, so Claire's decision to stay home was something they both agreed on early in their marriage. The crack started to show about 3 years ago. Claire began venting to me and Sarah about how Jake was distant, working long hours, and wasn't as engaged with the family as he used to be. She said he would come home exhausted, eat dinner in silence, and then retreat to his home office or scroll on his phone until bedtime. She chalked it up to stress from his job, but over time, her frustration turned into resentment. Claire started saying things like, "If he doesn't want to be here, why doesn't he just leave?" Or, "I feel like a single mom anyway, so what's the difference?" She complained that Jake never complimented her anymore, never took her out on dates, and wasn't interested in romance. At first, I was sympathetic, but the more I heard, the more I started to see another side to the story. Here's the thing. Claire can be difficult. She's incredibly critical and has a habit of nitpicking people to death. She would complain to me and Sarah about Jake. But when I visited their house, I saw how she treated him. She'd snap at him for the smallest things, loading the dishwasher wrong, forgetting to pick up milk on the way home, or not putting his shoes in the right spot by the door. She'd roll her eyes and make passive-aggressive comments in front of the kids like, "Daddy's always too busy to help, isn't he?" Or "Guess Mommy has to do everything around here." It was constant and honestly exhausting to watch. I'm not saying Jake is perfect, but it was clear to me that Claire wasn't exactly making their home life enjoyable. I tried gently suggesting that maybe she could ease up a bit, but she always dismissed me, saying I didn't understand because I wasn't married or a parent. She'd insist that Jake was the problem and that she was just reacting to his neglect. Fast forward to 6 months ago. Claire found out Jake was having an affair with a woman from his office. She discovered texts on his phone, flirty messages, plans to meet up, the whole 9 yards. When she confronted him, he admitted to it but insisted it had only been going on for a couple of months and that it was emotional at first before becoming physical. He apologized and said he wanted to work on their marriage, but Claire was livid and immediately demanded a divorce. This is where things get messy. Claire called a family meeting to tell everyone what happened, and it turned into a venting session where she listed all the ways Jake had failed her over the years. She cried about how she'd sacrificed her career, her social life, and her independence for him and the kids, only for him to betray her. She demanded our support and said she wouldn't tolerate anyone taking Jake's side. I stayed quiet during that meeting because I didn't want to say anything I'd regret, but later that night, Claire called me to ask why I hadn't spoken up. I told her I needed time to process everything, and that's when she exploded. She accused me of being unsupportive, ungrateful, because she'd babysat for me a handful of times over the years, and implied I was a bad brother for not immediately rallying behind her. That's when I told her the truth. I didn't think Jake's affair came out of nowhere. I told her that while cheating is absolutely wrong, I can understand why he might have felt pushed to that point. I said her constant criticism, negativity, and lack of affection had probably made him feel unappreciated and disconnected from her. I told her that while Jake's actions were inexcusable, she also bore some responsibility for the state of their marriage. Claire lost it. She screamed at me, called me a misogynist, and accused me of victim blaming. She said I was just like Jake because I couldn't handle a strong woman who demanded respect. She hung up on me, and I didn't hear from her for days. Now, Claire is telling everyone in our family that I'm siding with Jake and that I think she deserved to be cheated on, which isn't what I said at all. Sarah is furious with me and says I should have kept my mouth shut, even if I felt that way. My parents are trying to stay neutral, but have hinted that I should apologize to keep the peace. Meanwhile, Jake reached out to thank me for being honest, which only makes me feel worse because it feels like I've betrayed my sister. I'm torn. On one hand, I stand by what I said. I do think Claire's behavior contributed to the breakdown of their marriage, and I don't think it's fair to put all the blame on Jake just because he's the one who cheated. On the other hand, I hate that this has caused such a rift in my family. I never wanted to hurt Claire, but I also don't think it's fair for her to demand unconditional support without taking any accountability for her own actions. So, am I the asshole for telling my sister she's partly to blame for her husband's affair and refusing to blindly support her in the divorce? AITA for refusing to attend my brother's wedding after he made me step down as best man? This situation has blown up so much that I feel like I'm losing my mind. I'm 30M, and my brother, Daniel, 33M, is getting married in a couple of months to his fiancée, Emma, 31F. I was originally supposed to be Daniel's best man, but things have taken such a dramatic turn that now I'm not even sure if I want to attend the wedding at all. Daniel and I have always been close. We grew up in a tight-knit family, and even though we're only 3 years apart, I was kind of the go-to person for him growing up. Whether it was helping him through his first breakup or bailing him out of sticky situations, I've always had his back. So, when he asked me to be his best man, I was genuinely honored. I took the role seriously, knowing how important this day was to him. From the start, I went above and beyond to make everything perfect. I planned an incredible bachelor party, details approved by Emma, of course, to make sure it was something everyone was comfortable with. I started drafting a heartfelt speech, reached out to his close friends to get their input, and was actively helping him with other wedding-related tasks. I even pitched in financially for some wedding expenses that were stressing him out. For months, I've been working hard to make this wedding memorable for him. Things started going downhill about 6 weeks ago when Emma's sister, Sophie, 28F, got more involved in the planning process. Sophie is Emma's maid of honor, and to put it politely, she has a very controlling personality. She's the kind of person who insists on everything being done her way or not at all. She started pushing ideas for the wedding that Daniel and Emma hadn't agreed on and was micromanaging the entire bridal party. At first, I tried to stay out of it. I figured it wasn't my place to interfere, even though Daniel privately complained to me about how overbearing Sophie was being. But then Sophie started making comments about me and my role as best man. She said I seemed too casual and implied that I wasn't taking the wedding seriously enough, which couldn't have been further from the truth. When I asked her what she meant, she pointed to the bachelor party plans, saying they weren't elegant enough for a wedding of this caliber. Mind you, the bachelor party was a low-key weekend getaway with Daniel's closest friends. No wild parties or anything inappropriate. I brushed off her comments and focused on doing my part. But Sophie wasn't done. A week later, Daniel called me and told me that Emma and Sophie had raised concerns about me as the best man. He said they thought I wasn't aligning with the vision of the wedding and suggested that maybe it would be better if I stepped down. I was shocked. I asked him what I'd done wrong, and he didn't give me a clear answer. He just kept saying, "It's not personal, it's just about keeping the peace." I tried to explain how much effort I'd been putting in, but he seemed uncomfortable and just kept repeating that it was for the best. Eventually, I agreed to step down, even though it hurt like hell. I told myself it wasn't worth causing a scene, and I wanted to support my brother, even if I had to take a back seat. After stepping down, I found out that Sophie's boyfriend, Mark, had been asked to replace me as best man. Mark and Daniel barely know each other. They've only met a handful of times at family gatherings, and it felt like such a slap in the face to be replaced by someone who had no meaningful connection to my brother. When I brought this up to Daniel, he got defensive and said it wasn't about Mark being better suited, but about avoiding tension between me and Sophie. He said he didn't want family drama overshadowing the wedding. I was hurt, but I still planned to attend the wedding and be there for my brother. That was until last week when Sophie decided to throw fuel on the fire. She sent a group text to the entire wedding party with a list of rules and expectations. It was a long list, including things like no drinking at the reception before speeches, no social media posts without prior approval, and no uncoordinated outfits for guests. But the part that really pushed me over the edge was when Sophie explicitly called me out in the group chat, saying, "Let's make sure everyone keeps the focus on the bride and groom, especially you, my name, since you have a habit of making things about yourself." I was livid. I immediately called Daniel and told him that Sophie's comments were out of line and disrespectful. He tried to downplay it, saying she was just being thorough and that I should let it go. I told him I was sick of being treated like an afterthought, and that if this was how things were going to be, maybe it was better if I didn't come to the wedding at all. He got upset and accused me of overreacting, saying that I was being selfish and putting him in a difficult position. Since then, things have escalated. My parents are begging me to reconsider, saying that not attending the wedding would break Daniel's heart. They've acknowledged that Sophie is difficult, but think I should be the bigger person and suck it up for the sake of family unity. Some friends and extended family members have taken my side, saying Daniel and Emma are letting Sophie run the show and that I shouldn't have to put up with her nonsense. But others think I'm being petty and that skipping the wedding would be an overreaction. I don't want to hurt my brother, but I also feel completely disrespected. I've done nothing but try to support him, and this is how I'm treated in return? I've gone from being his best man to being singled out and humiliated in front of the entire wedding party. At this point, I don't even know if I can show up without feeling like a total doormat. So, am I the asshole for refusing to attend my brother's wedding after being asked to step down as best man? AITA for telling my mom I won't fund my brother's wedding after everything he did to me? Let me start by saying this is a messy situation that has torn my family apart, and honestly, I don't know if I'm in the wrong here. I'm 35M, and I've been relatively successful in life. I own a small tech company, and while I'm not a billionaire or anything, I've done well for myself. My younger brother, Liam, 30M, and I have always had a complicated relationship, and this latest chapter in our family saga has brought everything to a boiling point. Growing up, Liam was the golden child. Our mom doted on him, constantly excusing his behavior, while I was expected to be the responsible, mature one. Liam was the kind of kid who got away with everything. He'd break something and blame it on me, and I'd get punished. He'd flunk a class, and Mom would say the teacher was out to get him. Meanwhile, I was the one who had to get straight A's, do chores without being asked, and generally keep my head down. It created a lot of resentment, but I buried it because, well, that's what I was taught to do. Fast forward to adulthood, and not much has changed. Liam bounced around between jobs, never really sticking to anything. He has this talent for charming people into giving him second and third and fourth chances, but he never follows through. He's racked up debt, borrowed money from family members without paying it back, and generally coasted through life while everyone around him picks up the slack. I, on the other hand, worked my ass off to get to where I am. I didn't have anyone bailing me out when I struggled. I had to figure things out on my own. About 5 years ago, Liam hit rock bottom. He was evicted from his apartment, had no job, and nowhere to go. Mom begged me to let him stay with me just for a little while until he got back on his feet. Against my better judgment, I agreed. I set clear boundaries. He could stay rent-free for 3 months, but he needed to get a job and start saving money. Well, those 3 months turned into a year. Liam made half-hearted attempts to look for work, but most of the time, he just played video games and made excuses. He complained that the job market was too competitive or that he couldn't find anything that suited his skill set. Meanwhile, I was covering all his expenses, food, utilities, everything. The breaking point came when I found out Liam was stealing from me. I noticed money missing from my wallet a few times, but I brushed it off, thinking maybe I'd miscounted. Then one day, I caught him red-handed trying to take cash out of my desk drawer. He broke down crying, saying he was desperate and didn't know what else to do. I told him he needed to leave. Mom, of course, was furious with me for abandoning Liam and said I should have been more understanding. That was the first big rift in our family, but I stood my ground. Since then, Liam and I have been cordial but distant. I stopped lending him money or getting involved in his problems, and he eventually moved back in with Mom. He's managed to stay afloat with odd jobs and by mooching off her, but he's still the same irresponsible person he's always been. Meanwhile, I've worked hard to build a life for myself. I got married last year to my amazing wife, Emily, and we're expecting our first child in a few months. Now, on to the current drama. A couple of months ago, Liam announced that he's getting married to his girlfriend, Sophie, 28F. They've been together for about a year, and while I don't know Sophie very well, she seems nice enough. The problem is, Liam has no money to pay for the wedding. True to form, he turned to Mom, who then turned to me. She asked if I could help out by covering the cost of the wedding. When I hesitated, she went on this long rant about how family supports family and how it's my duty as Liam's brother to step up. I told her I wasn't comfortable paying for Liam's wedding, especially considering our history. I reminded her of everything I'd already done for him and how it ended, but she brushed it off, saying that was years ago and he's changed. I don't see much evidence of that, but even if he has changed, I don't think that means I owe him anything. When I refused, Liam called me furious. He accused me of holding a grudge and trying to sabotage his happiness. He said I was being petty and selfish, and that it wouldn't even be a big deal for me to cover the wedding since I have so much money. I told him it wasn't about the money. It was about the principle. I don't think it's fair for him to expect me to bail him out yet again, especially for something as extravagant as a wedding. Since then, the entire family has gotten involved. Mom has been calling me nonstop, alternating between guilt trips and outright yelling at me. She says I'm punishing Liam for his past mistakes and that I'm going to regret not being there for him. Some of my aunts and uncles have chimed in too, saying it's not worth causing a family rift over money. Even Sophie reached out, trying to mediate, but it just made things more awkward. She said she understood my hesitation, but hoped I'd reconsider for the sake of family harmony. Emily, bless her, has been my rock through all of this. She says I'm absolutely not in the wrong, and that it's ridiculous for anyone to expect me to pay for Liam's wedding. She pointed out that we have our own expenses to think about, especially with a baby on the way, and that we shouldn't feel guilty for setting boundaries. Still, the pressure is getting to me. Mom has all but declared me the villain of the family, and Liam has been going around telling anyone who'll listen that I'm a greedy, selfish asshole who cares more about money than family. Part of me wonders if I should just cave to make everyone happy, but another part of me feels like this is a line I can't cross. I've spent my whole life cleaning up Liam's messes, and I'm tired of it. So, am I the asshole for refusing to fund my brother's wedding, even if it means alienating my family? AITA for leaving my sister's wedding early after she turned my daughter into a waitress? This situation has caused a massive blow-up in my family, and honestly, I'm starting to feel like I've lost my grip on what's reasonable. I'm a 40-year-old single mom to my daughter, Lily, who's 16. She's an amazing kid, smart, funny, and incredibly kind. She's also a bit shy, and big social events can be overwhelming for her, but she always tries her best to be polite and participate. My younger sister, Vanessa, is 29 and just had her wedding last weekend. Vanessa has always been the type of person who wants everything to be perfect. Her Instagram is filled with highly curated photos, and she's obsessed with things being aesthetically pleasing. She spent the past year planning her wedding down to the tiniest detail, and while I was happy for her, it was obvious from the start that this was going to be a high-maintenance event. Vanessa asked Lily to be a junior bridesmaid, which Lily was hesitant about, but agreed to because she wanted to support her aunt. I thought it would be a good opportunity for Lily to step out of her comfort zone and bond with Vanessa, especially since Vanessa doesn't have kids of her own and sometimes struggles to relate to Lily. I figured it would just involve wearing a dress, walking down the aisle, and maybe posing for a few pictures. Not a huge deal. The problem started a few weeks before the wedding. Vanessa sent out a list of expectations for her bridal party, which included things like attending a rehearsal dinner, getting professionally fitted for dresses, and chipping in for her bachelorette party. This was a bit much, especially since Lily is just 16 and doesn't have a job, but I paid for her dress and covered the cost of her attending the events. Lily went along with everything, even though I could tell she was getting stressed. Vanessa, meanwhile, was very particular about how everything needed to look and would make passive-aggressive comments if someone didn't meet her standards. On the day of the wedding, things really came to a head. We arrived at the venue early for photos, and Vanessa was already in full bridezilla mode. She was snapping at people left and right, including the photographer, and nitpicking everyone's appearance. Lily was wearing the dress Vanessa had picked out for her and looked beautiful, but Vanessa kept fussing over her hair and makeup, saying it wasn't matching the aesthetic. Lily looked uncomfortable, but she didn't say anything and let the makeup artist fix her up. After the ceremony, during the cocktail hour, I noticed Lily wasn't mingling with the other junior bridesmaids. When I went to find her, I saw her standing near the bar, carrying a tray of drinks and appetizers. At first, I thought maybe she was helping out, but then I realized she was actually serving guests. I asked her what was going on, and she told me Vanessa had asked her to pitch in because one of the waitstaff had called out sick. Vanessa told her it was no big deal and that she'd only need to help out for a little while. I was furious. Lily isn't an employee, and it wasn't her responsibility to cover for a staffing issue. She's a kid, not free labor. I confronted Vanessa, who acted like it was no big deal. She said Lily wasn't doing anything anyway and that she was helping make the day run smoothly. She even had the audacity to say that it would be good experience for Lily to learn how to handle responsibility. I told Vanessa it was completely inappropriate to treat Lily like hired help, especially without asking me or giving her a choice. Vanessa rolled her eyes and said I was being dramatic and that Lily was happy to help. When I asked Lily how she felt, she admitted she felt pressured and didn't want to make a scene by saying no. That was the last straw for me. I told Vanessa that if she couldn't respect my daughter, we weren't staying for the reception. She started yelling that I was ruining her wedding and accused me of being jealous of her special day. My mom and some other family members tried to mediate, saying it wasn't worth leaving over and that we should just let it go. But I wasn't willing to let my daughter be treated like a waitress at her own aunt's wedding. Lily and I left before the reception started. Since then, I've been bombarded with texts and calls from family members, most of whom are siding with Vanessa. They say I overreacted and that it wasn't a big deal for Lily to help out for a little while. My mom has been especially harsh, saying I humiliated Vanessa and made the wedding all about me. Vanessa, of course, is playing the victim and claiming I ruined her day over something minor. Lily has been quiet about the whole thing, but when I asked her if she thought I did the right thing, she said she was glad I stood up for her. That's the only thing keeping me from doubting myself, because the rest of the family has made it clear they think I'm the asshole. So, Reddit, am I the asshole for leaving my sister's wedding early after she turned my daughter into a waitress? AITA, for refusing to help my brother pay off his debt after he blamed me for his financial problems? I'm going to start by saying that this situation has been tearing my family apart, and I don't even know where to begin anymore. I'm 32F, and I have an older brother, Jake, who is 35. We grew up in a pretty normal household. Our parents were loving but pretty strict about money. They taught us both to work hard, be responsible with our finances, and never rely on others to bail us out. I took that advice seriously, and I've always been good with my money. Jake, on the other hand, was the opposite. He was always a little more carefree, sometimes reckless, and just assumed that things would always work out for him without putting in the work. Over the years, Jake has gotten into a lot of financial trouble. He's had multiple failed business ventures, maxed out credit cards, and taken out loans he couldn't repay. Every time he gets into trouble, he calls me for help. At first, I helped out of love. I gave him money when he said he was struggling to pay bills or needed a loan to start a new project. Every time I thought, this is the last time, but then he'd always come back with another crisis and another plea for help. The thing is, I never get the money back. He promises to pay me back, but it never happens. I know that sounds harsh, but I've tried every way possible to make him understand that it's not okay to just expect me to solve all of his problems. I've had conversations with him where I've laid it out, saying, if you're asking for help, I need you to take responsibility for your actions and figure out how to make things right. He'd agree, say he was sorry, and then it would happen all over again. Now, the situation has escalated to the point where I'm being asked to pay off a large sum of his debt, around $50,000. This is a combination of unpaid loans, credit card debt, and personal guarantees on business loans. It's been a nightmare to even understand the full scope of his finances, but I've gotten the details, and it's a mess. He says he's in over his head and doesn't know what else to do, and he's asking me to step in and help him pay it off because, according to him, it's the only way he can ever get out of this hole. I told him no. I've been firm about this for years, and I told him that I'm not going to put myself in the position of cleaning up his messes anymore. I'm not in a place where I can just throw away $50,000 without seriously damaging my own financial stability. Not to mention, I'm planning on saving for my own future, retirement, buying a home, all of those things, and I can't afford to jeopardize that for him. Jake didn't take it well. He went off on me, saying that I've always been selfish and never helped him when he needed it. He accused me of being the reason he's in this mess, saying that I never gave him the support he needed when he was trying to start his businesses. I was shocked. I've always supported him emotionally, and I've even given him advice and resources when he asked for it. But apparently, that wasn't enough for him. He told me I was better off without him and that I was cutting him off at his lowest point. He also said that if I really loved him, I'd help him get out of this debt and help him turn his life around. He made me feel like the worst person in the world, accusing me of abandoning him when he needed help the most. I tried to explain that he needed to take responsibility for his own actions and that enabling him by paying off his debt wouldn't help him in the long run. I told him that if I paid it off, it wouldn't teach him anything, and he'd be right back in the same position a year from now. I suggested he work with a financial advisor, find a way to consolidate his debts, or even go into a payment plan with the creditors. But he wouldn't hear any of it. He told me I was being heartless and unsympathetic and that he'd never trust me again if I didn't help him. Now, things have gotten even worse. My mom, who has always been closer to Jake than to me, has been calling me constantly, trying to convince me to help him. She says I'm being too hard on him and that I need to step up and be a good sister. She says that families should support each other, no matter what, and that it's my duty to help him because I'm financially stable. She also told me that if I don't help, I'll regret it and that I'll ruin our family. I've had a few heated arguments with both Jake and my mom, and it feels like the entire family is turning against me. My other relatives have been calling me, asking why I'm not helping Jake and why I'm turning my back on him, Some even think that I'm doing this out of spite because I've always been more successful than Jake. It feels like I'm being painted as the villain for simply saying no to his request. The thing is, I've been thinking about this for a long time, and I honestly believe I'm doing the right thing. Jake's financial troubles have been going on for years, and every time I've helped him, it's just delayed the inevitable. He needs to learn how to manage his money and take responsibility for his life. I can't keep enabling him just because he's my brother. But I still feel guilty. Part of me wonders if I'm being too harsh. Am I really being a bad sister by not helping him? I've always been there for him emotionally, but I just can't bring myself to bail him out financially again. I've worked hard to get where I am, and I don't want to risk my own future for someone who has repeatedly shown that he's not going to change. So, AITA for refusing to help my brother pay off his debt after everything he's done? AITA for not wanting my fiancé's sister to be my maid of honor after she lied to me multiple times? I need some outside perspective because I'm really struggling with this and feeling like I might be in the wrong. I, 29F, am engaged to my fiancé, 31M, Luke. We've been together for about 3 years, and we're planning our wedding for later this year. We're both really excited, but there's a huge issue with his sister, Sarah, 34F, that's putting a strain on everything. Sarah has always been a bit overbearing, and from the beginning of my relationship with Luke, she's made her opinion known about everything. Whether it was about our house, how I should spend my money, or the way Luke and I should manage our time, she always had something to say. I'm generally the type of person to just let things slide and try not to make a big deal out of it. But recently, it's gone a little too far. When it came time to pick my maid of honor, I naturally thought of my best friend, Jenny, 29F, who has been there for me through thick and thin. She and I have been friends since high school, and I knew she would be the perfect choice. I told Luke, and he was totally on board. However, when I mentioned this to Sarah, she completely shut it down. She said that she should be the one to be my maid of honor because she's Luke's sister and that it would mean so much to their family. I was taken aback, but told her that I had already chosen Jenny and that I felt it was important to have someone close to me in that role. Sarah looked pretty upset, but I thought she'd get over it. Well, she didn't. Over the next few weeks, Sarah started pushing harder, making little comments every time we were together, like I'm really the best person to be your maid of honor. You know? I've been in weddings before and know what I'm doing. She'd give me unsolicited advice about the wedding planning, telling me how I should do things, even suggesting I change my dress or the venue. She said that I needed to consider her feelings and that I was making a big mistake by not having her as the maid of honor. I started to feel suffocated, but I didn't want to rock the boat, so I politely declined each of her suggestions. Then came the moment that really pushed me over the edge. We were at a family dinner at Luke's parents' house, and Sarah had been drinking. She was in a good mood at first, but then she started talking about the wedding. Out of nowhere, she accused me of not caring about her or Luke's family. She said that I was disrespecting their family by not choosing her as maid of honor, and that I was shunning her. I was shocked and tried to calm her down, but she kept going, claiming that I didn't understand how much it meant to her. It was honestly embarrassing, and I felt humiliated in front of Luke's parents and relatives. Luke did step in and tell Sarah to calm down, but it didn't end there. The next day, I was texting Sarah, trying to explain that I wasn't trying to hurt her feelings, but that I had already made my choice. I told her I loved her as family, but that this was something important to me, and I hoped she could respect that. She told me that if I didn't make her the maid of honor, she wouldn't be in the wedding at all. She said, I won't be part of a wedding where I'm not the maid of honor. You can't expect me to just show up for something that's supposed to be a celebration when you clearly don't care about me. I was honestly floored by this, and I felt like I was being manipulated. I told her that I wasn't going to change my mind, and that if she didn't want to attend, that was her choice. The situation has only gotten worse since then. Sarah hasn't stopped trying to convince me that I should change my mind. She sent me texts, called me, and even had a few heart-to-heart talks with Luke, where she cried about how hurt she was. Luke is caught in the middle, and while he's been supportive of me, he's also clearly uncomfortable with the tension. He keeps telling me that he doesn't want to lose his sister over something as trivial as this, but I don't think I'm the one making this a bigger issue than it is. I've explained to him that I'm just standing my ground, and I don't think it's fair for Sarah to be so manipulative about the situation. Now, Sarah is telling everyone that I'm being unreasonable, and she spread rumors in the family that I'm taking advantage of Luke by not considering his family in the wedding plans. I've gotten messages from Luke's aunts and cousins saying I should just give in and let Sarah be the maid of honor so we can all move on. Some family members have even said that I'm being too sensitive and that Sarah is just being protective of her brother. I've tried to explain that this is not about her being protective, but about me choosing someone who has been my best friend for years, and that my choice is mine to make. I've honestly had enough of the stress and the pressure, and I don't know what to do. Part of me wonders if I should just give in, but then another part of me feels like I would be letting Sarah walk all over me. I've worked so hard to plan this wedding, and I don't want to compromise on something that is so important to me. So, Reddit, am I the asshole for refusing to let my fiancé's sister be my maid of honor after everything she's done? Should I just let her take over so there's peace? Or am I right to stand firm? AITA for asking my brother to pay me back after he borrowed money for his wedding and never repaid me? This situation has caused a lot of tension in my family, and I really don't know if I'm being unreasonable or not. I, 27F, have a brother, Jake, 30M, who is getting married soon. We've always had a bit of a strained relationship, but I've always tried to be there for him when it really matters. He's been in a tough financial spot for a few years now, and I've helped him out multiple times in the past. This latest situation, however, has really pushed me to my breaking point, and I need some outside perspective. A few months ago, Jake and his fiancée, Emily, 29F, were in the middle of planning their wedding. They were struggling with finances for various reasons, mostly because Jake wasn't making enough money at his job and had some debts he had been trying to pay off. His fiancée had just lost her job, and they were relying heavily on credit cards to get by. They were running out of options, and Jake asked me for a loan to help with wedding expenses, specifically for paying the venue deposit, catering, and other prepaid wedding costs. He told me that he'd pay me back as soon as possible, and that it was just temporary. Now, I'm not rich by any means, but I make a decent living and don't have kids, so I don't have as many financial responsibilities as some other people. I thought long and hard about it, but eventually, I agreed to lend Jake $10,000 with the understanding that he'd pay me back in installments after the wedding was over. I didn't want to see him miss out on his wedding or start the marriage with so much stress, so I agreed to help. He was really grateful and promised that he wouldn't forget what I'd done for him. Fast forward a few months, and Jake and Emily have had their wedding. It went off without a hitch, and they seemed really happy. However, since then, I've asked Jake multiple times when he'll start paying me back. Every time, he's given me vague answers like, "I'll get to it soon," or "Things are tight right now, but don't worry, I'll pay you back." The first few times I let it slide, but after months of no repayment, I started to get frustrated. I know that sometimes people need a little extra time, and I'm not the type of person to demand money back immediately, but the longer this went on, the more I felt like I was being taken advantage of. Finally, about 6 months after the wedding, I sat down with Jake and told him I needed to start getting some of that money back. I explained that I had my own financial plans and obligations, and that I wasn't in a position to just keep waiting around indefinitely. I was hoping for a clear answer, or at least a start to some repayment plan. Jake got defensive immediately. He said, "I'm still figuring things out. I've had a lot going on, and I don't have extra money right now." He also added, "It's not like you're the only one who helped. Emily's parents gave us money too, and they didn't expect anything in return." I didn't mention it at the time, but it really bothered me that he was comparing me to his fiancé's parents. Emily's parents have a much higher income than I do, and I helped Jake out of my own pocket, not as part of some family obligation. I'll let the conversation end there, but things only got worse after that. I started to feel like Jake was purposefully avoiding me or brushing off my request for repayment. I've sent texts, made phone calls, and tried to have casual conversations about it, but I never get a solid commitment. Meanwhile, Jake and Emily have been posting on social media about their dream life together, and it's hard not to notice that they're constantly going out for expensive dinners, taking trips, and buying new things. Every time I see them doing something like that, I feel like a fool for lending him so much money when he clearly has enough to spend on luxuries. Finally, last week, I snapped. I sent Jake a message that said something like, "I need to know when I'll be getting at least part of the $10,000 back. I'm not asking for it all at once, but it's been over half a year now, and I need you to be honest with me. You promised to repay me, and I'm not seeing any effort on your part." Jake responded with a long message saying, "You knew things weren't great financially for us, and I thought you understood that. It's not like I'm avoiding you or anything. I've just had other things to focus on. You're acting like I've abandoned you or something. I haven't forgotten you, but I'm doing my best. You'll get your money when I can afford to give it to you." That response really upset me. It felt like he was downplaying everything I'd done for him, and it didn't seem like he was taking my financial concerns seriously. I was hurt, and I told him that it wasn't fair for him to ignore our agreement, especially after I had sacrificed to help him. I reminded him that I never asked for anything in return, but that I needed him to honor his word. Since then, things have gotten tense between us. Jake has been cold and distant, and Emily has been making passive-aggressive comments when I see her. Some members of our family have weighed in, and it seems like people are divided. A few of our relatives think I'm being too harsh, saying that I should be more patient and understanding because they just got married and have other expenses. Others have told me that I'm right to expect him to pay me back, but no one really knows how to handle this situation. The worst part is that I feel like I've lost trust in Jake. This isn't the first time he's asked me for money and not followed through on his promises, but it's definitely the largest amount I've lent him. I don't want to be someone who holds a grudge, but I also don't want to keep enabling his behavior. I've already let this slide for far too long, and I don't know how to move forward. I'm starting to feel like I'm just going to have to accept that I'll never see that money again, and that's not a position I want to be in. So, Reddit, am I the asshole for asking my brother to pay me back after he borrowed money for his wedding and never followed through? Should I let it go and stop asking, or do I have a right to demand that he keeps his promise? AITA for refusing to attend my sister's wedding after she demanded I change my appearance for the day. I'm in a bit of a dilemma right now, and I really need some outside perspective. I, 29F, have an older sister, Kelly, 31F, who's getting married in a couple of months. We've had our ups and downs growing up, but we've always managed to get along as adults. We both lead pretty busy lives, and while we're not super close, we've been there for each other during important events. I have always tried to support her, especially when it comes to things like birthdays, holidays, and special occasions, but recently, she asked me to do something that I'm finding very difficult to swallow. Kelly has always been someone who loves having control over situations. She's a perfectionist when it comes to her appearance, the way things are organized, and how she expects people to behave. She's the type of person who will spend hours picking out the perfect outfit for every occasion, and she expects others to match her level of perfectionism when it comes to family events. A couple of weeks ago, she called me to talk about her wedding, and it seemed like just another casual conversation. She was talking about how everything was coming together, and we were chatting about what the bridesmaids would be wearing, who would be doing the flowers, and all of that. But then, she casually mentioned something that caught me off guard. She told me that she was thinking about the aesthetic of her wedding day and how everything, including the guest appearances, had to match the vibe. At first, I didn't think much of it, but then she dropped a bombshell. She said, "I need you to change your hair for the wedding." Now, this is where things started to feel off. My hair is something that I've always felt pretty confident about. It's long, dark, and curly, and I've worn it the same way for years. I get compliments on it all the time, and I'm comfortable with it. But Kelly said that she wanted me to either straighten it or get it styled in a way that would match the wedding's elegant and sophisticated look. I was a bit taken aback by this request, but I brushed it off and said, "I don't know, Kelly. I've always worn my hair this way, and I'm not sure I want to change it just for your wedding." That's when she started to get a little more insistent. She said, "It's not about your personal style, it's about the bigger picture. I need everyone to look a certain way on my wedding day. It's a once-in-a-lifetime event, and I want everything to be perfect." She emphasized that she wanted the day to be aesthetically cohesive, and she felt that my natural hair didn't fit in with the rest of the bridal party's elegance. I tried to explain that this request felt uncomfortable to me, but she didn't seem to understand. She told me that it wasn't a big deal and that she would be happy to pay for me to get my hair professionally styled. But that just made me feel worse. It wasn't about the money or the inconvenience. It was about the fact that she was telling me that my appearance wasn't good enough for her wedding. It felt like she was trying to control something that was so personal to me, and I wasn't sure how to handle it. I tried to explain that my hair was a part of who I am, and changing it for her wedding felt like I was giving up a piece of myself just to make her happy. I told her that I understood if she wanted everyone to look polished, but I didn't think I should have to change who I am for the day. She didn't seem to get it. She said, "I'm just asking you to do this one thing for me. I'm your sister, and this is my wedding day. I really need you to respect that." Now, I know that weddings can be stressful, and I didn't want to add more stress to her plate, but I also didn't want to feel like I was losing my sense of self for the sake of her perfect day. It was becoming clear to me that her expectations for her wedding weren't just about the event itself, but also about how people looked, acted, and even behaved. A few days later, I talked it over with some of my friends, and they were all supportive of my decision to keep my hair the way I wanted. They agreed that it was my choice, and I shouldn't feel pressured to conform to someone else's standards, especially when it came to my appearance. But the more I thought about it, the more I started to feel guilty. I didn't want to cause drama or make Kelly upset, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being asked to change something fundamental about myself for no good reason. A week later, I decided to call Kelly again to tell her that I was still uncomfortable with the idea of altering my hair for her wedding. I tried to be as diplomatic as possible and explained that I wanted to support her, but I didn't think I could change my look just for the wedding. I told her that I would be happy to do whatever I could to help make her day special, but my hair was non-negotiable. Kelly was furious. She told me that I was being ridiculous and selfish for not understanding how important her wedding was to her. She accused me of not caring about her special day, saying that if I really loved her, I would do this for her. She also told me that my refusal to change my hair made her feel like I was purposely trying to sabotage her wedding, and she said that if I couldn't respect her wishes, I wasn't welcome to attend. I was shocked. I had never imagined that something as simple as my hair could cause such a huge rift between us. I tried to explain that it wasn't about not respecting her wishes, but rather about not wanting to compromise my identity for the day. I told her that I still wanted to be there for her, but I couldn't make that kind of personal change just to please her. She ended the conversation by saying that if I didn't change my hair, I could forget about being in the wedding or even attending. I was devastated. I've always been close to my sister, and I never expected something like this to happen. I felt like she was giving me an ultimatum: change my appearance, or you're out. Since that conversation, I've been going back and forth about what to do. Part of me wants to stand my ground because I don't feel like I should have to change for anyone, but the other part of me feels guilty. I've been in tears about it because I know how much this day means to her, but I don't know if I should sacrifice my self-respect just to avoid drama. I don't want to lose my sister over something like this, but I also don't want to feel like I'm constantly compromising my sense of self for her. So, Reddit. AITA for refusing to change my appearance for my sister's wedding and considering not attending because of it? Should I just give in and change my hair, or do I have the right to stand firm in my decision? AITA for not helping my brother after he made a huge mistake and is now expecting me to clean up his mess? I, 29M, have an older brother, Luke, 32M, who has always been a bit of a wild card. We've had a somewhat strained relationship growing up, mostly because I've always been more responsible, and he's always done things without thinking them through. But despite all of that, we've maintained a connection and kept in touch over the years. I've helped him out when he needed it, even if it meant sacrificing my own time and energy. But lately, I'm starting to feel like I've been taken for granted, and it's starting to affect my own life. Here's the situation. A few months ago, Luke came to me with a problem. He'd made a bad financial decision by investing a large chunk of his savings into a new startup he was excited about. The startup turned out to be a complete disaster, and he lost almost all of his investment. He was understandably stressed, but I tried to be a supportive brother and advised him to take a step back, assess the situation, and figure out how he was going to recover from this. I didn't want to just tell him, "I told you so," because I knew he was feeling pretty low about it. But instead of taking responsibility for his actions, Luke started blaming everyone around him. He blamed the founder of the startup for misleading him, the economy for being unpredictable, and even his friends for not telling him to back out sooner. I tried to offer advice on how he could get back on his feet, maybe looking at picking up some extra work or cutting back on expenses, but Luke wasn't hearing it. He just kept repeating how he couldn't believe he'd been so stupid and how it was all going downhill. I suggested that he talk to a financial advisor or consider selling some of his assets to get himself out of the hole, but he didn't want to hear any of it. He just wanted to sulk and complain. Then, a few weeks ago, Luke came to me with another request. He told me that he was now struggling to pay his rent because of the money he lost in the investment, and he needed me to help him out. He said it would only be temporary, just until he figured things out. He asked for a few $1,000s to cover his rent and living expenses until he could find a way to bounce back. I was shocked, to be honest. I've always been generous with my family, but I also have my own financial responsibilities. I've been saving for a house, and while I'm not living paycheck to paycheck, I'm also not rolling in money. I told him that while I understood he was in a tough spot, I didn't think it was responsible for me to just hand him that kind of money, especially considering how he got himself into this mess in the first place. I suggested that he look into a loan or maybe ask some other family members, but I wasn't comfortable giving him that much money without him showing me a plan for how he was going to get out of the situation long term. I didn't want to just be a band-aid for a bigger issue that he hadn't even started to address. Luke didn't take my response well. He called me selfish and said that I was just looking down on him because he wasn't as financially successful as I was. I told him that wasn't the case and that I cared about him, but I couldn't just hand over money without any accountability or effort from his side. I told him that maybe he needed to take some hard steps to address his finances, like getting a second job or moving in with someone temporarily to lower his expenses. After that conversation, he didn't talk to me for a while. I figured he was just upset and needed some time to cool off. But then, a week later, I found out that he'd gone to our parents and told them I had refused to help him. Apparently, he had painted a picture of me as being the cold, selfish brother who didn't care about family. Our parents called me, furious, asking why I hadn't helped him when he was clearly in a bad spot. They told me that I should have been there for him and that family should help each other no matter what. I tried to explain my side of the story, but they just didn't get it. They said that I was being too harsh and that it's just money. It's not like it's the end of the world. I tried to remind them that it wasn't about the money, but about how Luke needed to take responsibility for his actions and stop relying on other people to clean up his mess. They weren't having it. My parents told me that I should reconsider my stance and that I should just help him out so he can get back on his feet. At this point, I was feeling pretty frustrated. I've always been the responsible one in the family. I've worked hard to get to where I am, and I've sacrificed a lot of my time and energy to make sure I'm not in financial trouble. It's hard to just give that kind of support to someone who doesn't seem to want to take responsibility for their own actions. I've been nothing but supportive of Luke, but it's starting to feel like he just expects me to bail him out every time something goes wrong. I'm honestly tired of it, and I'm starting to feel like I'm being taken advantage of. Now Luke's not talking to me, my parents are upset, and I feel like I'm being treated like the bad guy. Maybe I'm just being too harsh, but I really don't think it's my responsibility to fix all of his problems. I've tried to be there for him in the past, but I can't keep doing this if he's not going to make any effort to change. So, AITA for not helping my brother out financially after he made a huge mistake and is now expecting me to clean up his mess. AITA for calling out my friend for constantly making fun of my relationship with my partner. I, 27M, have been in a relationship with my boyfriend, Mark, 28M, for almost 2 years now. We met through mutual friends and have really clicked from the beginning. We've built a strong, loving relationship based on trust, respect, and a lot of shared interests. I know that relationships take work, and we both put in the effort to maintain a healthy connection. Mark's kind, thoughtful, and incredibly supportive, and I feel very lucky to have him. However, there's one person in my life who has constantly had an issue with my relationship, and that person is my best friend, Jake, 27M. Jake and I have been friends since high school. We've always been close, and he's someone I consider family. He's been there for me through the highs and lows of life, and I've done the same for him. But recently, things have started to get a little rocky between us, and I'm not sure how to handle it. For context, Jake has always had a bit of a cynic streak when it comes to relationships. He's never been in a serious relationship himself, and I've always chalked it up to the fact that he has some commitment issues. He's told me on numerous occasions that he's not relationship material and that he prefers casual flings. I've never been judgmental about it, and I've always supported him in whatever makes him happy. But when I started dating Mark, things began to change. At first, Jake was supportive of my relationship. He congratulated me when Mark and I made it official, and he seemed happy for me. However, as time went on, his attitude began to shift. He started making subtle jokes about Mark and I, commenting on how perfect we seemed and how unrealistic it was for anyone to have such a picture-perfect relationship. He would say things like, "Yeah, you guys are so happy now, but give it a few months and let's see if he's still around," or, "It's all just a phase, right?" I brushed these comments off at first, thinking they were just jokes. But then they started becoming more frequent and more pointed. Whenever we hung out, Jake would make fun of the way Mark and I interacted with each other. He would mock our inside jokes, tease me about how whipped I was, and say things like, "Isn't it cute that Mark thinks he's the only one who can make you happy?" It was clear that Jake didn't understand the dynamics of our relationship and was projecting his own insecurities onto it. One night, we were all out at a bar together, and Jake took things too far. Mark and I were having a conversation at the bar, and Jake was sitting at the table with a few other friends. He started making comments about how Mark was just another guy who doesn't get what it means to be a man, and how I was settling for less by dating someone so emotionally needy. I tried to ignore it, but I could see Mark visibly uncomfortable. At this point, I'd had enough. I pulled Jake aside and told him that his comments were hurtful and unnecessary. I told him that I didn't appreciate him constantly putting down my relationship, and that if he couldn't respect it, he didn't need to be involved in our lives. Jake immediately got defensive. He accused me of being sensitive and overreacting and said that I was losing sight of reality. He told me that he was just trying to look out for me and that I was too blinded by love to see how toxic Mark really was. This conversation turned into a huge argument. I tried to explain to Jake that he was projecting his own fears and doubts about relationships onto me, but he refused to listen. He insisted that I was being manipulated and that Mark was playing the long game just to take advantage of me. I told Jake that I didn't need him to protect me from my own relationship, especially when he didn't even know Mark. I told him that I valued our friendship, but if he couldn't support me, then maybe we needed to take a break from each other. After that night, things have been tense between us. Jake hasn't apologized, and he's continued making passive-aggressive comments about Mark every chance he gets. He's even told our other friends that he doesn't think our relationship is going to last and that I'm just setting myself up for failure. I've tried reaching out to Jake multiple times to talk about what happened, but he refuses to have a real conversation. Instead, he keeps making snide remarks about Mark and acting like I'm the one who's in the wrong for defending my relationship. Now, I'm at a crossroads. I know that Jake is my best friend and that we've been through a lot together, but I can't stand by and let him continue disrespecting my partner and my relationship. Mark has been nothing but kind and supportive to me, and I don't want to choose between him and Jake. But at the same time, I feel like Jake's behavior is toxic, and it's starting to affect my other friendships as well. The problem is I don't know if I'm overreacting. Maybe I should just let Jake have his opinions and not take them so personally. But at the same time, I feel like my relationship with Mark deserves to be respected, and I don't want to continue tolerating Jake's negativity. I've been considering cutting ties with Jake for good, but I'm not sure if that's the right thing to do. So, AITA for calling out my friend for constantly making fun of my relationship with my partner? AITA for not supporting my best friend after she lied to me about my fiancé's job situation? I, 30F, have been with my fiancé, Kevin, 32M, for 2 years now. We met at work, and after several months of getting to know each other, we started dating. Kevin is hardworking, loyal, and always puts others before himself. He's been working in IT for a small company for the past 5 years. While his salary is decent, it's not exactly extravagant. We live comfortably, but we're not living a lavish lifestyle. Kevin is also someone who believes in the value of hard work and doesn't believe in showing off his money. He's always kept his job situation low-key and doesn't boast about his career or accomplishments, but he does take pride in his work. I have a best friend, Emma, 29F, who has been in my life since college. We've been through thick and thin together. She was there for me during some of the toughest times in my life, and I've always had her back. Emma and I have always been close, and I consider her a sister. Over the years, we've both gone through different phases in our lives, but our friendship has always stayed strong. Emma, however, has always had different financial aspirations. She comes from a wealthy family and has always been driven by material success. She's always talked about making it big, and while I never really judged her for it, I did notice that she often seemed to look down on people who didn't have the same level of wealth or success as her. I never let her comments bother me, as I knew that it wasn't necessarily personal. She just had different values when it came to money and success. It didn't affect our friendship until recently. When Kevin and I got engaged last year, Emma was thrilled for me, or at least I thought she was. She was one of the first people I told, and she was so happy and supportive, or at least that's how it seemed. She was already asking about the wedding plans, and we started talking about the details, including where we wanted to live after the wedding and what kind of lifestyle we envisioned. After a few months of engagement, Emma started to become more distant. She stopped showing up to some of our hangouts, and whenever we did see each other, her demeanor felt different. I brushed it off at first, thinking she might just be busy with her own life, but then it all came to a head during a group dinner with some other friends. That night, I was talking about Kevin's recent promotion. He had recently been promoted to a managerial position in his company, which was a big deal for him. We were both excited about the future, and I was really proud of him. During the conversation, Emma suddenly interrupted, and with a hint of disbelief, asked, "So, Kevin still works in IT, right? Does he even make enough to support both of you? I mean, what kind of future are you building with someone who's still working a regular office job?" Everyone at the table went quiet, and I could feel my face turn red. Emma had made a comment like that before, but this time, it felt more pointed. It wasn't just an offhand comment. It was loaded with judgment. Kevin had been sitting across from me, and I saw the color drain from his face. It was clear that he was uncomfortable, and I was too. I didn't know how to respond, but I could feel the tension in the air. I told Emma that Kevin's job was a legitimate career and that he was doing great for himself, but it didn't seem to calm her down. Emma then proceeded to go on a rant about how just an IT job wouldn't cut it long term, and that I needed to be realistic about what kind of life I wanted. She said things like, "You're never going to get anywhere if you keep settling for someone who's not even trying to push themselves to achieve something greater." It wasn't the first time she'd said something similar, but this was the first time she'd been so harsh in front of others. I could see how hurt Kevin was, and I was furious. I snapped back, telling Emma that she didn't understand what we were building together and that I didn't need to justify Kevin's career to her or anyone else. I also reminded her that her idea of success and happiness wasn't the same as everyone else's, and that maybe she should try to respect that. Emma's response was to shrug and say, "Well, I just don't think it's enough, but whatever." At that point, I was done. I told her that she didn't need to be a part of my life if she couldn't show respect for my partner and our future together. I told her she was being unnecessarily judgmental and rude, and I wasn't going to tolerate it anymore. I got up, paid my part of the bill, and left the dinner with Kevin, leaving the rest of the group awkwardly sitting in silence. The next few days were awkward. Emma tried reaching out to me, apologizing at first and saying that she didn't mean to hurt Kevin or me. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that this wasn't the first time she'd made comments like this. She'd always belittled Kevin's job, made snide remarks about his lack of ambition, and implied that I could do better in terms of career prospects. At first, I ignored it, but after that night, I couldn't just overlook it anymore. I texted Emma and told her that while I appreciated her apology, I didn't think it was genuine. I told her that her comments about Kevin's career were disrespectful, and if she couldn't understand why that was an issue, then maybe we needed some space. She responded by accusing me of overreacting and said I was being too sensitive about it. She also said that she was just trying to help me see things from a different perspective and that I shouldn't settle for someone who didn't have the drive to succeed. I didn't respond after that. I've been thinking about our friendship a lot, and I don't know if I'm being too harsh or if I'm just finally standing up for myself and my relationship. I know Emma's my best friend, but I can't keep letting her belittle Kevin and our relationship. Kevin has been nothing but supportive of me, and I won't allow anyone to talk down to him or treat him like he's less than because of his career. At the same time, I feel bad because Emma has been a part of my life for so long, and I don't want to lose our friendship. So, AITA for not supporting my best friend after she lied to me about my fiancé's job situation and made hurtful comments about his career. AITA for refusing to attend my brother's wedding after finding out his fiancé asked for my maid of honor spot and criticized my looks. I, 27F, have an older brother, Ryan, 30M, who's been with his fiancée, Emily, 28F, for about 3 years. They got engaged 6 months ago, and ever since then, things have gotten a little complicated between us. Don't get me wrong, I want my brother to be happy, but something Emily did has completely soured our relationship, and now I'm at a point where I'm questioning whether I should even attend their wedding at all. For context, Ryan and I have always been close. We've been through a lot together growing up, and while we're both pretty independent now, we still have a good sibling bond. I've always been very supportive of his relationships, even when I wasn't particularly fond of the person he was dating. I've never interfered or made things difficult, and I always try to be understanding of his choices, even if I'm not always 100% on board. Emily, on the other hand, I've never had a strong connection with. She's a nice enough person, but she comes from a different background than we do, and she's always had a very different view on family dynamics. I can't really pinpoint what it is, but there's always been a bit of a distance between Emily and me. We've never really clicked, but I've tried to be respectful of her and her relationship with Ryan. She's always seemed a bit cold and distant toward me, but I just chalked it up to her personality. A few months ago, Ryan asked me to be his maid of honor. I was so excited and honored that he wanted me to take on such an important role in his wedding. I'm not the type of person to get overly emotional about these things, but I've always dreamed of being part of my siblings' big day in a meaningful way, and being asked to be maid of honor was a huge deal to me. I've never had the opportunity to do something like this before, and I was thrilled. However, things started to take a turn when Emily started involving herself more in the wedding planning. It's not like I mind her being involved. She's the bride after all. But there were moments when I felt like she was trying to take over everything, including the role I was given. At first, it was just small things. She'd ask about the dresses I was considering for the bridal party and would suggest changes, even though I hadn't asked for her input. She would send me messages with her ideas for how the wedding should be organized, including who should sit where and what kinds of decorations she envisioned. I didn't mind, because it was her day, and I wanted to support her vision, but it was starting to feel like she didn't trust me to make decisions on my own. Then about a month ago, Emily dropped a bombshell. She pulled me aside one evening after dinner and told me that she didn't think it was appropriate for me to be the maid of honor anymore. She said that she didn't feel comfortable with the idea of me taking on that role because it would make her look uncomfortable in front of her family and friends. I was shocked and hurt, but I tried to stay calm and asked her why. She went on to say that the attention should be on her, not on me, and that it would make her look bad if people were looking at my appearance and not at her wedding. She said that the maid of honor should be someone who can reflect the kind of image they want for their wedding, and that she didn't think I fit that role anymore. I was blindsided. I asked her if she was seriously saying that my looks were the issue. She didn't answer directly, but she kept repeating that she wanted everything to be perfect, and she didn't think it would be right for me to overshadow her on her big day. I tried to stay composed, but inside, I was fuming. I didn't know how to process what she was saying, and I didn't know what to do. This was the woman who had just told me a few months ago how much she wanted me to be part of the wedding, and now she was telling me that I wasn't good enough to be in the spotlight on her big day. I felt rejected, belittled, and humiliated. At this point, I couldn't hold back. I told Emily that if she didn't want me to be the maid of honor, I would step down, but I also wouldn't be attending the wedding at all. I told her that I didn't feel like she respected me or valued me as part of the family, and I wasn't going to sit there and pretend everything was okay when she was being so cruel to me. I told her that if she wanted someone who fit her ideal image better, then she could have her pick of whoever she wanted. I walked out of the room, feeling a mix of anger and sadness. Ryan was upset when I told him what had happened. He tried to explain Emily's side, saying that she was stressed about the wedding and didn't mean to hurt me. He said that Emily had a specific vision for the day, and she didn't know how to communicate it without making me feel bad. I told him that I understood being stressed, but what Emily said to me was unacceptable. It wasn't about the wedding. It was about her being cruel and dismissive toward me. I told him that I couldn't be part of an event where I was made to feel so insignificant. Since that night, things have been tense. Ryan and I have barely spoken, and he's been pressuring me to reconsider my decision. He says that it would mean a lot to him if I could put aside my feelings and attend the wedding for his sake. He told me that it was just a role in the wedding, and I shouldn't let it come between us. But I'm really struggling with this. I can't just ignore how Emily made me feel, and I don't want to be a part of a day that feels so toxic to me. I've thought a lot about whether I'm being too dramatic, but I don't think I am. It's not just about the maid of honor spot. It's about the way Emily disrespected me and made me feel like I wasn't worthy of being a part of her day because of my looks. I've always been supportive of Ryan's relationships, but this feels like too much. I don't know if I should just swallow my pride and go for my brother's sake, or if I should stick to my guns and refuse to attend. I feel like I'm in a no-win situation. So, AITA for refusing to attend my brother's wedding after finding out his fiancée asked for my maid of honor spot and criticized my looks? AITA for refusing to support my best friend after she lied about my fiancé cheating on me? I, 28F, have been with my fiancé, Chris, 30M, for almost 3 years. We met during college, and things just clicked right away. He's a kind, funny, and loving person, and we've been through a lot together. We've had our ups and downs like any relationship, but we always managed to work through things. I've never doubted him, and I genuinely thought we had a strong relationship. I have a best friend, Sarah, 27F, who I've known since high school. She's been my rock, and we've been through everything together. We've supported each other through breakups, career changes, family drama, and just about everything else. Sarah has always been there for me, and I've always had her back. We've shared everything, and I thought she was someone I could trust without question. A few months ago, everything started to change. It began with Sarah making some offhand comments about Chris. At first, they seemed harmless. She'd joke around about how much he worked and how I was always spending time with him, suggesting that maybe I was getting too wrapped up in the relationship. She'd make comments like, "Are you sure you're not just a little too obsessed with him? And don't you think it's weird that he's always at work and never has time for you?" I didn't think much of it at first. Sarah has a tendency to make sarcastic remarks, and I always brush them off as just her being playful. But then, things started escalating. One night, Sarah invited me out for drinks, just the two of us. We were having a good time, chatting about life, when she suddenly dropped a bombshell. She told me that she had seen Chris at a bar with another woman. She claimed they were all over each other, and that Chris was definitely cheating on me. I was stunned. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Sarah told me that she had been at the bar with some friends and had seen Chris from across the room. She said she tried to approach him, but he was acting weird and immediately left with the woman. At first, I didn't know how to react. My heart was racing, and I felt like the world was crashing down around me. I immediately called Chris, but he didn't answer. I left him a voicemail asking him to call me back, and I spent the rest of the night worrying. Sarah kept telling me that she had seen it with her own eyes and that there was no way I could ignore what had happened. She said that I needed to confront Chris about it immediately. I was a mess that night. I barely slept, just tossing and turning with the thought of Chris possibly betraying me. The next day, I finally heard from Chris. I immediately asked him about what Sarah had told me, and he sounded completely confused. He told me that he had been at the bar, but he was there with a co-worker who was a woman. He said that they were talking about work, and that was all there was to it. He assured me there was nothing inappropriate going on, and that Sarah must have misunderstood. I didn't know what to believe. On one hand, I trusted Chris, and I knew he wasn't the type to cheat. On the other hand, Sarah was my best friend, and she had always been there for me. I didn't know why she would lie, but at the same time, I didn't want to dismiss Chris's side of the story so quickly. I decided to sit on the information for a while and try to process everything before I made any decisions. The next few days were filled with tension. I spoke to Chris about it several times, and each time, he reassured me that there was nothing going on with his coworker. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I started questioning everything, every little interaction we had, every time he went out with friends, and every time he was at work late. I even went so far as to check his phone when he was in the shower one night, something I never thought I would do. Of course, I found nothing. His messages were all work-related, and his social media was just like normal. But even with all the evidence pointing to Chris being innocent, I couldn't get Sarah's story out of my head. I felt betrayed by her, but I also didn't want to believe she would lie to me. So, I decided to have a conversation with Sarah. I sat her down and told her that I had spoken to Chris, and his explanation was very different from hers. I asked her if she was sure about what she had seen and why she thought it was so important to tell me that he was cheating. Sarah immediately became defensive. She told me that she had seen what she had seen, and that Chris was a slick talker who was lying to me. She said she had no reason to lie and that I needed to listen to her because she was just looking out for me. The conversation escalated quickly. I told her that I felt hurt and confused. If she was lying, I would never be able to trust her again, and if she was telling the truth, then I needed to make some tough decisions about my relationship. Sarah refused to back down, insisting that I was being naive and that Chris was just good at covering his tracks. I tried to explain that I couldn't just throw away my relationship based on hearsay. If Chris had done something wrong, I needed evidence, not just her word. She told me I was blind and delusional for not seeing the truth. She even accused me of defending him and choosing him over our friendship. After that conversation, things have been tense between us. I didn't know who to trust anymore. I tried to talk to Chris again, but he was hurt by the accusations and frustrated that I hadn't believed him sooner. He told me he couldn't keep going through this every time we had a disagreement. He felt like I had lost faith in him, and I didn't know how to fix it. It's been weeks now, and I haven't spoken to Sarah much. We've texted a few times, but I can feel the distance between us. She still insists she's telling the truth, and I'm still unsure. I feel like I'm caught in the middle of a battle between two people I care about deeply, and it's tearing me apart. I've been second-guessing every decision I've made in the past few weeks, wondering if I've done the right thing by standing by Chris or if I've been too quick to dismiss Sarah's warning. At this point, I'm struggling to understand if I'm in the wrong. I want to believe Chris, but I also don't want to lose Sarah as a friend. So, AITA for refusing to support my best friend after she lied about my fiancé cheating on me?